Welcome to the Spiritual Download. This is a channel for advanced spiritual journeys. If you're on a spiritual journey, you want to stick around and figure out why you are important, even in the context of the huge, gigantic universe. So I'm going to read from an article. I'm going to post the link to the article down below in the comments section. Basically, it's an article about Kaballah. Now, Kaballah is Jewish mysticism. Mysticism means that when you are searching for the truth of the universe, but in your heart rather than just in your mind. So this is an aspect of religion that is not so dogmatic. It's more about searching for truth in your heart rather than the belief system itself. So the Kaballah comes from the Jewish tradition. Now, in most religious traditions, there is mysticism. But however, in the West, such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, mysticism takes kind of a back seat, whereas in Eastern religions like Buddhism or Hinduism, mysticism takes a front seat where it's actually kind of the spiritual center of those religions. So I'm going to start reading from the article, and the title of the article is, "What is the Purpose of Existence?" Okay, so this is going to be kind of like a part 2 to the episode I just put out like 5 days ago, which is looking at the grand theory of the purpose of everything, meaning, and what I mean by everything is the universe in its totality, and then also you and all of us human beings. So a lot of times in philosophy, like in existentialism, for example, the idea of meaning is focused either on the human being or on the universe. Okay, so it's either subjective meaning or objective meaning. Okay, so my attempt is to combine both, whereas the objective meaning and the subjective meaning are actually in union as one grand unified theory of the purpose of everything. So here we're looking at, do you matter? Are you important in the context of the whole universe? And we're looking at the purpose of human beings in general. Why do human beings exist in the first place? And more generally, why does existence even exist? Okay, so this is important for our spiritual journeys, because this is what motivates us, and this is what gives us context for our journey. Right? What if we keep going on our journey? What are we going to encounter? Okay, you're going to encounter what it means to be human and what it means to be a part of this grand universe. Okay, so I'm going to start reading from this article. Basically, I'm looking at the notes that I've extracted, or certain sentences that I've extracted from the article. Again, if you want the whole article, I'm going to post the link down below. So first, it says, quote, "The universe doesn't have to be here. There is no reason that it or you or I or them or anything at all has to be here." Okay, so this is talking about ultimate reality. So, quote, "The ultimate reality, God, has no need for anything to exist at all." So those are the first 2 lines I'm looking at. So the idea is that it could be that just nothing at all exists, where it's just pure nothingness, which is basically, if you imagine what it's like for you when you are in between dreams during sleep. So what do you experience in dreamless sleep? That is complete nothingness. So there's no awareness. Well, it's awareness with a small a, meaning like your normal mind is not perceiving something, right? It's just pure nothingness. So it's just pure subjectivity. Okay, so it could be that. Now instead, God created the universe and God created things. So basically, instead of there being just one God, God split himself into many, many things. Okay, so that's the purpose of this article, is to understand why and how. Okay, so the next line says, quote, "But when God did bring everything into existence, he did it with a desire to be found within his creation, and he invested his entire being into that desire. That desire is a core element of reality. Call it purpose. It unfolds throughout history and eventually blossoms into the open." Okay, so God is a creator. So the purpose of the universe is creation. Okay, I learned this point from actualize.org big time, and also from this article. So like the purpose of God is to create. And he's like an artist. So this article is going to talk about God as an artist and a philanthropist, meaning someone who donates a lot of money or resources to others. So you can think of God as an artist and a philanthropist for bringing so much good into the world. Okay, so God is not just an artist, but he also creates it perfectly. So this article is also looking at why is the universe perfect. So that's related to my previous episode. If you're wondering how is the universe perfect and why is this the best of all possible worlds that could possibly exist, I would go to my previous episode looking at that, talking from a philosophical standpoint. The philosopher Leibniz, he convinced us that we're living in the best possible universe. Okay, so I'm going to continue going down. It says, quote, "The very fact that you are bothered by this question implies that you have, perhaps unconsciously, internalized the Torah." So the Torah is like the Bible for the Jewish religion. The Torah view of reality, namely that the world was brought into being by a creator. So the fact that we're asking this question of purpose, like, does the universe have purpose? So we're assuming that there is a creator that created purpose. Okay, so what if it was just existence without purpose? Okay, so that is a certain bias that we ask when we ask the question, what is the purpose of existence? Because it's very, very possible that there is no purpose at all. And that question, purpose, assumes that something or someone created this universe. So let's continue. Quote, "Because if the world wasn't created, if it was just here, then what's the point of asking about purpose? As one of the scions of today's Buddhism put it, I don't see any purpose to this whole cosmos. Why should he? Things that are just here don't need a purpose." The question of purpose rides on the assumption of creation. So why is there something rather than nothing? It seems like all of this stuff has a purpose from our perspective as humans, but really does it? Is it just from our perspective that it has purpose? Next, quote, "Why did things begin? What is the point of there being anything and not just leaving nothing alone?" Leaving nothing alone, meaning nothingness alone. Why is there something rather than nothingness? Okay, what is this purpose? Because there is something now, let's look at what the point of this somethings is. What is somethingness? And why am I a something? Why am I this particular something? Why am I not my next door neighbor? Even that would probably not be as good as who you are, right? You'd rather be yourself than your neighbor. But why are you yourself rather than your neighbor? Have you ever really thought about why is your consciousness in this mind and not someone else's mind? Okay, we'll look at that in another episode. But that's a huge reason why we assume that there's meaning, is because we are in this like happenings. There's all of this stuff that's going on. Let's try to figure out what's going on. Okay, number 6, quote, "You are also assuming there is a consciousness behind the creation." Consciousness meaning a decisive process. Things don't just happen by a chain of linear causality. Like if you have A, therefore B, B, therefore C, ad nauseum. That's a philosophical way of talking. Neither do they happen by chance. Okay, whatever chance is. There is a design behind the cosmos, and that design is not inevitable. Okay, so this is saying that consciousness is behind the creation, as it says. So consciousness means, in this case, that it's like made a decision. So there's a consciousness is putting a purpose out there. So if there is a creation, there is deliberate purpose behind it, is what it's arguing. Okay, next quote. "The structure of the universe is open to us like never before, and lo and behold, all of the evidence all points to a purposeful universe." In the words of Paul Davies, one of the best expositors of what is being called the anthropic model of the universe. There is an unbelievable delicacy in the balance between gravity and electromagnetism within a star. Calculations show that changes in the strength of either force by only 1 part in 104 would spell catastrophe for stars like the Sun. The sheer improbability that such felicitous concurrences could be the result of a series of exceptionally lucky accidents has prompted many scientists to agree with Hoyle that the universe is a put-up job. Had the universe been created by a slightly different laws, not only would we or anybody else not be here to see it, but it is doubtful if there would be any complex structures at all. Okay, so this is looking at that the universe is not by accident. Okay, the universe is deliberate. Now, this is getting into my idea of what is evolution for real. I'm probably going to put another episode out there called What is Evolution for Real? Evolution really is that the entire universe has a purpose. It's not just that animals are either helping or striving for existence and survival. Okay, it's not just like Homo sapiens beat out other species so that they could continue living. It's actually that the entire frickin' cosmos has a purpose. Okay, and we're going to look at what that is here. And it's deliberately designed by God. It's deliberately designed by a creator. Okay, it's because it's so beautiful and perfect. Like, have you ever really wondered how is all of this happening? How does life happen? Like, how is my body just happening? I don't even have to think about it that much, right? I just get hungry sometimes. How is my heart beating for real? Like, how is it that, it was just like this soup of atoms, and all of a sudden later you have human beings that their heart is beating like automatically, and they're creating cities, and they're like manipulating music and sounds so that they can create beauty. It's really, really amazing. So let's continue. Quote, physicist Brandon Carter notes that the speed of light multiplied by Planck's constant and divided by the square of electrons charged roughly equals 137. Carter argues that if this ratio were ever so slightly more than it is, then all stars would be blue giants, and there would be no planets at all, let alone living creatures. If it were somewhat smaller, all stars would be red dwarfs, and thus the planets orbiting them far too cold to sustain any kind of organism. The speed of light, it seems, was fixed at the beginning for the sake of the whole show. Okay, so this is related to my previous episode. So God put in this law called consciousness and intelligence. Those are the two keys. And then you got physics right after that. So physics was created after these laws of consciousness and intelligence. So the universe is inherently conscious and intelligent. That's actually more basic than the constant of the speed of light, that law of the speed of light. So speed of light, that law came after the initial just bringing into the existence of consciousness and intelligence. Okay, quote, a conscious creator with a design in mind. The entire universe is constantly being designed by God that is completely way smarter than anything that you can ever imagine. Because this universe is perfect. It's not just that it's huge, it's that it's completely perfect. Okay, as it says, quote, God, the creator of all this, is perfect. Quote, perfect means not lacking anything, no faults, no needs, everything is there. Not only everything we could imagine in its ultimate state of perfection, ultimate wisdom, ultimate knowledge, creativity, ultimate power, beauty, but that which we cannot imagine as well, since it is not part of our world. Okay, it's hard to imagine what perfection is because we don't see it here as humans. We see a lot of imperfection because our nature is meant to be imperfect. Okay, so it says, quote, human relationships, eating and building all have purpose. Okay, so the purpose of being a human is an aspect of this perfection. Okay, even though we are built to be imperfect, our job to be our true selves is an aspect to bring about this perfection. Okay, we're serving a purpose for God, right? And that's to be our true selves and to learn about our true selves. Because by learning about ourselves, God is learning about himself. Okay, and that's the purpose of the universe, is God creating all that he wants to figure out who he is. Right? If you imagine, like, if you're an alien and your consciousness was downloaded into your body, because then you would be testing out your body, right? You would say, like, what are these hands? Like, and what are these thoughts? Like, what is this navel? What are my feet? You would be like, wow, my body is so amazing, right? That's basically what God is doing for the entire universe, is he's stretching out there, manipulating it, trying out different hats to figure out like exactly who he is, or it. Okay, so next, God, quote, God is not hungry. He doesn't have to worry about getting wet in the rain. He can do just fine without getting into a relationship. He's perfect. That's what makes him God. So if God needs nothing, why does he need a world? Perhaps God is an artist. Do artists need their art? Would a perfectly fulfilled artist nevertheless produce more masterpieces? The Zohar mentions that the world was created in order that there be creatures that will know him in every measure by which he directs his world, with kindness and with judgment, according to the acts of humankind. For if his light would not spread to each of his creations, how would he be known? In what way would be fulfilled? All of the earth is filled with his glory. Without the act of creation, all of God's infinite perfections lie in a state of potential. Creation is something like the expression of an artist bringing that potential into the actual. Okay, so nothingness is pure potential that could potentially be something. Okay, so human beings are something, but they could have just been potentially nothing. But instead, we do exist, again, because God is stretching out and trying to learn about himself. But God, really, another aspect of him is pure potentiality, the potential to be anything at all. Okay, and that potentiality is what, like, the atoms in physics is happening inside of. So the atoms are coming out of existence, and then God can manipulate these atoms in any way that he sees fit through evolution. Okay, so evolution is designed. Evolution is not a happenstance. All that's happening in evolution for both life and the universe is deliberate, planned, like a magnificent chess game. Without the act of creation, all of God's infinite perfections lie in a state of potential. It cannot be the ultimate purpose, however, because it still places human limitations on an unlimited God. So the key to humans is that we're supposed to be limited. Because God has only ever been unlimited, he wants to learn about everything, right? Everything needs to exist. So even limited things like human beings need to exist as well. Okay, and even though humans are less limited than, say, animals, still we're learning about that fine line between limitation and unlimitedness. Next we have, quote, if God is truly perfect in every sense, then he is not lacking even the perfection that comes through actualizing potentials. He is the artist and the art in a perfect whole, in the Rashab's classic statement. For a created being, what is potential is not actual, but above this is not so. Potential is not lacking actuality. Potential and actual exist as one. So let's go back to where it says the artist and the art in a perfect whole. So God is the painter and the painting. Okay, so that means God is the thing or the non-thing that created you, but also you as the artwork of God is also God. So that proves to you that even though it seems like you're limited, you are in nature the unlimited God, the unlimited divine intelligence of the entire universe. Quote, God does not even have the need to be an artist in the first place. Whatever creative expression could give him, he has already without doing a thing. In the language of the Kaballah, the infinite has infinite light, which manifests all perfections. So what need is there for a world? Okay, if God is perfect, why does he need a world? Why does he need limitation? Again, because, like I mentioned, he has only ever been unlimited, so he needs to know what it's like to be a limited thing in order to know what it's like to be everything. Again, quote, when it arose in his will, blessed be his name, to create the world in order to do good to his creatures, that they might recognize his greatness and merit to be a vehicle for that which is above, to bond with him, blessed be he. Okay, so this is a beautiful, beautiful quote. It has a lot to do with my previous episode. Humans are what's called, quote, a vehicle for that which is above, meaning that humans are driving an aspect of the universe. God is learning about himself through us. Okay, God can't learn everything about him by being an unlimited nothingness. God needs to learn about everything by being nothing and everything. So we are an aspect of everything, but we are also everything itself. So we are everything and a part of that everything. Quote, God is good, therefore he creates. Quote, being good is more than self-expression, more than being an artist. Both an artist and a philanthropist give. But while the artist is driven by the urge to actualize his talents, the philanthropist is driven by the needs of others. So God granted perfection as a substratum or a foundation of the world. Quote, being good is more than self-expression, more than being an artist. Both an artist and a philanthropist give. But while the artist is driven by the urge to actualize his talents, the philanthropist is driven by the needs of others. So God created greatness and goodness, and the essence of our world as human beings is goodness. It seems like there is evil that goes on. However, that's an aspect of God's goodness, actually, because we see these things as evil because it's a detriment to our survival, is evil things like murder, rape, etc. We see those as bad because it's bad for our survival. However, we don't, as small beings, don't actually need to survive in particular because we are the aggregate. Okay, so in aggregate on Earth, things are becoming better and better and better. So that's an aspect of this evolution, is that everything is getting better and better and better. So that's a good aspect of God as well, is that aspect of perfection and goodness. Next we have, quote, so a world came to be by implication of God's absolute goodness. Again, in the language of the Kaballah, because it's such an elegant language for discussing these things, infinite light is not enough. There must be recipients to absorb that light and respond to it. For example, a world. Okay, so there's infinite light that has unlimited potentiality to be anything. But what's going to absorb that are limited things. So the only way, so like if you have a beautiful movie that's going on in a movie theater, but there's no audience, right? Then it's kind of almost pointless for limited things. So like if there's an audience that actually makes the movie more beautiful as recipients. Next we have, quote, all of the toil and tribulation of mankind can be explained this way. Why do we have free choice or free will? Why must we blunder about in the dark? Why all this struggle, all this evil, all because God is good and wishes for us the ultimate good? Free bread, the sages say, is bread of shame. If you truly want to give to others, give them the opportunity to earn the gift. That's dignified bread. So God allows us to struggle so we can feel a sense of ownership to the fruits of our toil. So this is explaining why it's so freaking hard to get enlightened, to be an enlightened being, is because you have to earn it. You have to go above your struggle to survive in order to enter into God's goodness completely. Right now we are all lost in the struggle to survive. But hopefully in the future, our survival will become so easy that we can spend our time trying to learn about God and ourselves completely. We're going to put all of our energy instead of into survival and getting rich, we're going to put our energy into learning about how our consciousness is also God's consciousness. So we're actually completely one with each other and God. Okay, next we have, quote, ours is not the only world. Torah talks about angels and souls. So it's not like here's God and here's our world. There are steps in between. All right, so I'm going to talk about this more in the future, but there are many, many levels of spiritual realms from this human realm until the absolute godness of the entire, more than even the universe. It's actually all of existence. So that would be like this. Human beings are like this. Okay, but in between, there are all these levels like subtle bodies, cosmic bodies, meaning that there's these beings that most human beings do not perceive. However, I will be interviewing a person who does perceive such subtle beings like angels. They do exist. They do manipulate our world in order to improve our own evolution as humans. However, it's going to talk about this in this episode, in this article. But they're kind of helping us along and kind of interpreting how we're living life and trying to help us in becoming better spiritual beings year by year, month by month, in my life, in your life. So there's actually literally spirit guides trying to push you along, even though you don't sense them. You can sense them by meditating a crap ton or taking ayahuasca or something like that. All right, so next. Even the best of worlds is a disappointment for a perfect God. Creativity, when you're perfect, doesn't mean making more, it means making less. As the Kabbalists would say, God creates with shadows first and with a light in a distant second. It's a process of attrition. He starts with infinite light, then he creates a state of consciousness that is in some way void of his presence. Then he draws into that void an inkling of the infinite light to give that consciousness form and life. That's one world. He repeats the process, creating a void once again, then filling it with an infinitesimal inkling of the infinitesimal inkling of light of the previous world, another world. The process is called tsutsum, and it continues through infinite steps. That's what it says. Until the lowest possible step arrives, and you're not going to like this, but that is our world. So the Kaballah considers our world, the world of human beings and animals, the lowest world. Okay, and it's going to explain that here. Why is ours the lowest possible? Because the entire concept of our world is just to be a world, to look entirely self-contained, as though it's just here, as that Buddhist fellow maintained. Look outside, maybe you'll see a tree. What does the tree say? Unless you're one of those clairvoyants that spend afternoons in discussion with trees, the tree says just one thing. Here I am, here I was, I am just here. Sure, human beings that use their minds will read beauty and meaning into that tree, but that has to do with the inherent spiritual nature of the human being. The tree on its own, as with all of this mundane world, has only one thing to say: I am here. In fact, that's what even we human beings call reality. Come to think of it, human life is an even better example of what I am talking about, more than a tree or even a rock, because human beings are the ultimate in just being. Look at all those busy human beings out the window. Note how each one goes about his or her business with the same air of egocentrism. It's not something to be embarrassed of, it's just the way we are. We can feel another's emotions, we can sense another's intellect. But when it comes to the ego, for each one of us, there's only one ego in the entire cosmos that's our own. 7 billion yous, he's, she's, and thems. Only one me. Every human being, the very first man, the infant child, the lowliest low life on the street, the most powerful dictator of history, all share this one perception. The universe revolves around me. Sure, we can pass it, or at least hide it beneath the clothing of social etiquette, but as sure as there are bones in our body, that ego will always be at the core of all we do. It's a defining factor of our world. If your window opened up to a higher world, things would not look this way. In a higher world, what you see here as a tree would be there an angel malak in Hebrew means messenger. A messenger saying, I am creation. I am telling you something about how I was created and what gives me life. Their creations are more like light reflecting their source, or information communicating from a higher transmitter. But in our world, none of that message comes through. With all of the encoding, compression, filtering, and distortion along the way, it ends up unreadably garbled, which results in egos, including egos that deny they even have a creator. Some that even believe they themselves are God, having created all about them. as in the very first emanation of a world. But then, why continue the chain of concealment and distortion to get to ours, to be kind and nice? Does he really have to create a place that becomes such a dark and awful mess? Does he need to create a reality that asserts it is all there is? Does he need to create egos? Create some basic emanations? Be nice to them and stop there? Who decided that being good to another is a good thing? Who created goodness and its definitions? He did, God, along with all the rules of logic and rationality. So we're back to square one. Is there any reasonable reason for logic and rationality and goodness, or recipients of infinite light, or even infinite light, or anything at all to exist? There is no reason, period. He doesn't need our world. God doesn't need us. But there is purpose, absolute purpose. God has no need or reason for creating a world. He just did it. But when he did it with a purpose. He decided to desire to have two opposites at once. A very mundane, real world that we live in, discovering its creator in all of its aspects. Through human beings, animals, plants, planets. In the language of the ancient Midrash, he desired a home for himself in the lowest of worlds. Lowest of worlds, as we explain above, that's our world. In terms of clarity of signal, clear information about its source, you can't get lower than this and still have anything exist. That's what makes it seem so real, the lack of apparent connection to its source. And that's what makes it so central, to the point that within it stands the purpose of all things. If this sounds counterintuitive, that's because it is. Get used to it. From this point on, all our conclusions will be based on this counterintuitive principle. Okay, I'm going to talk about more. I'm going to have episodes on counterintuitiveness and paradoxical thinking in the future. But be comfortable in paradox. Be comfortable that I am me and I am God. Be comfortable that black and white can be the same and that there's a lot of gray area. Okay, be comfortable that 1 equals 2. It's all right that it's counterintuitive because, as you recall, it's not reasonable. God doesn't need a home. He's perfectly comfy doing nothing at all. He just decided to desire this world, and he can decide to desire whatever he decides to desire. That doesn't mean, and this is crucial to note, that he doesn't really desire it. On the contrary, have you ever dealt with an unreasonable desire? Reason has its limits, but when things are decided just because, you are no longer dealing with anything you can work around. You are dealing with the total person. So too here, God decides, this is what I choose to want, just because I so decided. And so, he is there in that desire in all his essence. So God decided to create all of this, and he is completely in it, 100%, because he desires it to happen. He desires the limitations. He desires the evil that we perceive. He desires you as an imperfect being. However, he loves you infinitely. So you perceive yourself as finite, but you have complete openness or access to infinite love and infinite bliss at all times. So even if you're in your room in the dark by yourself, you can't sleep, and you're crying because you feel that you're living in a meaningless life. I know that feeling, that emotion is God's hand, is God's paintbrush. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Counterintuitive, but immaculately elegant. First of all, no other answer so well expresses what the Kabbalists call the simplicity of the infinite. The infinite, blessed be it, is beyond reason, beyond seeking perfection. All these are no more than fictions of its own design. Purposely placing purpose in the lowest of worlds is a poignant expression of this point. In fact, it is the ultimate expression of the essential infinite. It makes so much sense of the patterns we see throughout the cosmos and throughout the blueprint of the cosmos. Everything is this marriage of opposites, this process of the higher finding itself in the lower, the center finding itself in the peripheral, the one expressed in the many. No one has brought this point out so much as the Rebbe, whose approach to every problem in Torah and in the world is to frame it within the context of this dynamic. The essence of all things desires a home within the concrete reality. So God desired for himself to be you. This was planned. God planned to be you. God, the most perfect thing in the fucking universe, decided to be you. So wake up and notice your perfection, even in the imperfection, like your little ego. But that doesn't matter because you are perfect in your essence. Okay, you need to realize that right now. How is my consciousness, my mind perfect? My self, my true self, how is this perfect? You have to ask yourself, close your eyes and say, how am I perfect? Like, even though I seem imperfect, ask yourself, why am I perfect? Where is this perfection? Where is it? Where is it? Please, God, show me perfection. Okay? And you say that from your heart as if you would die if you didn't know. Okay? That's meditation. That's prayer. Okay? Next. This fusion of opposites as well is a magnificent expression of that essence, which is beyond all binary configurations of yes and no, being and not being. Okay, that's what they say, the fusion of opposites, the yin and yang. Okay, white and black converging as one. Okay, day and night. You can't have day without night. You can't have mountains without valleys. You can't have perfect without imperfect. You can't have, as it says here, being without not being, yes without no. Although it is beyond reason, since it is the reason that reason came into being in the first place, it is still something we can intimately relate to. After all, we too desire a home. Our entire lives and our irrational yearning for life is all about this desire to find ourselves within a concrete reality. The metaphysical universe has just been turned on its head. The angels in the higher worlds revolve around the earth. They are subject to us down here. As much as the angels look down on us, all those spiritual beings depend upon us for their very livelihood and day-to-day itinerary. The job of humankind is not to be spiritual cosmonauts, but cosmic miners, tapping in the heavens for the inspiration to carry on their work below. And what is that work below? Plowing the fields of earthly life so it will absorb the rains from above, planting and reaping the seeds of heavenly deeds done here on earth, building and sustaining a sanctuary for the highest of all highs down below and the lowest of all lows. The ultimate state of the grand human trek is not as souls in heaven, but as souls in bodies. In the end of days, he writes, all souls will return to their respective bodies, and there they will remain for eternal bliss. Building a dwelling in a lowly world doesn't mean that world now becomes ethereal and angelic. There already are enough angelic ethereal worlds. No, it has to remain just as concrete, earthly, and downright egocentric as it was created. The only adjustment is that this very earthliness will be perceived as godly. The ultimate ego, he is the center of all things. He is all that is, for real. And so when he breathes, it is his own self into a creature made of earthly mud. That creature feels just the same way. Ego, the ultimate center of all things. The source of all emanations. His existence is from his own being and not the effect of any cause that preceded him. And therefore he alone has the capacity to create something from absolutely nothing, with no precedent or cause to its existence. Ultimate expression of this is the physical earth upon which we tread, and that is why it appears the way it appears, because it is a reflection of the ultimate reality. Turns out that this is lowly, egocentrifugal world has something that no higher world can offer, the essence of God. Furthermore, not only is God's desire for a home directed at this world of ours, it is the only real estate suitable for such zoning, because the essence simply cannot be expressed anywhere else, but within a mundane, concrete, egocentric world. As written in the book of Formation, the beginning of all things is embedded in their end. A home in the lowest world, then, does not mean annihilation of the ego and a more fuzzy reality. It simply means that these things will fess up for what they truly are, the ultimate forms of godly expression. With all this counterintuitivity, a practical application is called for. Let's say someone is about to eat a meal. Common wisdom would place all possible postures to this exercise between two poles. The brainless egocentric posture is, I'm hungry. If I'm hungry, I eat. This food is what I like. I eat what I like. Why? Because when I'm hungry, I eat the food I like. The other side of the pole is the enlightened egoless posture. I'm hungry, but that is not important. I don't even notice I am hungry because I am so enwrapped in higher metaphysical matters. What is food after all? What is hunger? What is a body? What am I? But since God has commanded me to support this body, and this is done by eating food, I will partake of a small morsel of food to fulfill my obligation. Which one of these fulfills the Creator's purpose in creation? The answer, of course, is neither. The first posture has a real-world feel to it, but no sense of anyone dwelling there but the human ego. The second has a higher consciousness dwelling there, but no real sense of the world, because the subject has suppressed that part of himself, the ego, that makes him a citizen of this lowly egocentric domain. To achieve the mandate of godly home in the lowest world, there must be a nexus of these two poles. And here it is. I am hungry. When I am hungry, I eat. Why? Because that is what earthly beings like me do. And here is the food I like to eat. But wait, I have a purpose. My desire for food has a purpose. So I will say a blessing on the food and eat it with the proper mindfulness that I am eating so I can fulfill my purpose in life and do lots of good things. Now let's eat. In this posture, there is a real person living in a real world, but doing something godly. And so God says, yes, that's what I was looking for. Counterintuitive, but doable. So that's the end of that article. So the idea, the big idea, is that it seems like God isn't here, but that was part of God's intention to not seem here, because we need to be imperfect in order for God to be everything. And we need to experience what it's like to be imperfect. God needs to experience what it's like to be anything and everything. So God needs to know what it's like to be you. And also, you being God will mean that you will experience everything that there is to experience eventually. And even though because there's no time, actually you already have been everything, and you will be everything. It's hard to talk about when there's no time, but really you have been everything. So you are the painter and the painted. You are the killer and the killed. Okay, you are the lion eating the buffalo. Okay, in the savannah of Africa. Okay, so that's it. If you have any questions, comment below. If you liked the video, click that like button. I'll see you next time. Peace.